Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adage's webinar, Google Analytics for How to Plan Ahead for a Smooth Transition. We are very excited to have you all here today. And some quick notes before we get started. There will be a Q&A session after the webinar, so please feel free to ask questions, to submit questions throughout the presentation, but please know that we will get to them at the end. And any questions that we are not able to get to in time, we will make sure to record those answers and send them out to post-webinar. We also will be sending out a recording of this webinar at a later date within the next week or so. So without further ado, let's have learn more about Google Analytics 4 from Scarlata.
Everyone, today we wanted to take some time to go through the newest version of Google Analytics 4 and how we're going to plan ahead for a smooth transition into GA4 itself. First, we wanted to go through and go over who I am. I am a digital marketing analytics engineer and analysis here at Adage, and I have 23 years of development experience touching front-end, back-end, search engine optimization, tag management, website analytics, basically everything that is entailed within the front end and or back end of the website I've hit. So if you guys need any help with anything within Adage, I'm probably the person that will help out along the way. And the last bullet point I have here is that I like data. Analytics is really good for looking at patterns, and I'm really good at looking at those patterns too, and it's really fun for me. So that's who I am. What we're going to go over today is the first part of what is Universal Analytics and GA4. The second portion is going to be what the transition looks like and what it should be within your corporation and or organization. And then the last portion is going to be how we can help. So things we need to know about Google Analytics. Just like in any other program, Analytics has been around for a while, and that means that it's had a lot of updates. But up until right now, we've actually gone through and only had to change some sort of code, a very small amount, and just there's been additions to the front end. But with GA4, that has changed altogether. The biggest issue was that previously, when Google Analytics was just web-based, we had one version, and then we had a second version called Firebase Analytics that tracked visitors differently because it was app-based. While Google decided to go and combine both of those so that you can actually track users from your app over to the actual website. And it doesn't actually have to be just an app, it could be anything that's out there too. The idea here is that we've moved over to a simpler way of sending that data so that it can actually be a little bit more device agnostic. So Google Analytics 4, Google has said that they will be sunsetting the current Universal Analytics on July 1st, 2023. They did mention that they've pushed the timeline for 360 accounts, which are the paid accounts, but they've made no mention of that for the regular free Google Analytics 4 accounts. So we're all working on the idea that July 1st is going to be the cutoff date. And basically at that point, you're going to have no new data coming in. Your current data will be there. Google has said that they will promise at least 1 year's worth of data to be saved, or that is data to be saved for 1 year past July 1st, but they have not expounded beyond that. So we suggest creating a new GA4 property and running the code parallel to what you have right now too, because GA4 and Universal Analytics can be run in parallel. They do not conflict with each other. And we want to get as much information into GA4 as we can for right now. And then also it will allow us to look within UA and also GA4 and make sure there's no gaps there. There's going to be a small amount of gaps because of the different way that Universal Analytics and GA4 inputs that data. But we don't want to see any large gaps of data that we're missing. So now we're going to go over the actual GA4 changes and what happened with this new version. The first thing you want to know is that while before we had properties, those are still in existence, but these properties, instead of having views, include data streams. Okay, and so these data streams allow multiple ways of inputting data from different outside areas, right? So it could be your app, it could be a website, it could be multiple websites. There are people that, and I will explain this later on, because views are gone, they have been using multiple data streams for each one of those views. So you have multiple properties there too. But nonetheless, data stream is just literally a hookup from one end of a app to another, right? So the web would be the app, and then it's just hooking up and bringing in all that data into GA4. And then the second most obvious change is the fact that we're moving away from a very strict way of sending data to Google Analytics, and we're actually going through and changing that to just events only, right? So before we had page views, custom events, other small items that we can actually send through as interactions. We've actually removed those constrictions, and everything you do on the website is an event. A page view is an event. An interaction that we're tracking is also an event. And this actually allows us to do a lot more than what we could within Universal Analytics. One of those things is the fact, and we'll go over later on also, but one of those things is the fact that previously when we built funnels and other measurement visuals, we weren't able to actually look at that data as a whole because it was different types of data. Now, since everything is an event, we can actually combine and look at that data, compare it, everything all at once. So, and on top of moving everything to just events, we've actually moved everything into events plus parameters. Now, as you see on the right, the old Universal Analytics only allowed one specific type of event, and within there was a category action label. Those are the three items that we can basically finagle all of our data in. And it was really limiting, right? If you really wanted to put a lot more data in there, a lot of background and metadata, we really couldn't. We'd have to really hack around it, right? With Google Analytics 4, we actually have event and then the parameters that are the metadata going throughout also. So the way to visualize this would be the fact that when you're looking at something or describing something, let's say a car actually has dimensions, right? And so these parameters are the dimensions of that car. Otherwise, you just have a car, that's it, right? With the Universal, you had a car that was a type of car and a model of a car. Now you can do type, model, and then everything else about that car too can be passed along with those events too. And that allows us to actually, when we're looking at data within GA4, to segment that data a lot cleaner. So it's a really better way of dealing with everything, even though it might be a little bit cumbersome or a little bit over a lot of people's heads right now. With the default installation of GA4, and that is just literally placing the code on the page for your data stream, you're going to get the option of having default tracking events that is called enhanced measurement. These are page views, scrolls, outbound clicks, site search, video engagement, and file downloads. Each one of these, before when we were using Universal Analytics, would need to be a custom tag and or code on page. By default now, that's all wrapped up into one tag and or one piece of code. The one thing to know about these though is that they're not passing a lot of parameters, right? The thing I just talked about, how we actually send a lot of data that creates that idea of that event. These do not send a lot of that data. They send default data, but not a lot of the data that you would want by itself. So as you start using the enhanced measurement and as you start using GA4, you might want to, and most likely would want to, turn these off one by one and switch that up so that those events are being called in through a tag manager and or code on page with the parameters that you want and not necessarily the default parameters that are coming through with these enhanced measurements events. One thing that that GA4 does to help us out is adding AI. This is called Predictive Metrics. The reason for this is because within the new realm of the web, there's a lot of people that really want to have their privacy respected, which is obviously what Google wanted all along, and what Google is trying to do within Chrome also. Firefox was the first browser to start actually blocking a lot of ads slash third-party code. And because Google Analytics is a third-party code, some of that is being blocked also. And that leads to gaps in our data that is coming in that was not an issue in the past. And the way that Google is fixing this is by using a load of data that they have through Google Signals and other means, and actually bulking up that data with these predictive metrics, basically just AI, that's actually going to show you the progression of those patterns rather than having gaps here and there, and then all of a sudden you can't figure out exactly what's going on. The one thing that's going to be a big news story is the fact that there's no views within GA4. Once again, Universe Analytics, a lot of people are very familiar with. And so because of that, when they see the no views, a lot of people get scared, especially because we're trying to go through and filter a lot of this data. Now, what's actually happening is the fact that within GA4, all the data that you want is already being brought in. We can actually create filtered data within GTM or code on page, but all that data, those are coming through as basically those parameters I was speaking about earlier. And so we can actually segment via that data too. So the fact that there's no views is problematic to some people because they like all their stuff in their own silo. But that being the case, you can easily segment out any data that you want via GA4 too. And then the next thing that's going to be problematic for some people is the fact that there is a lack of default reports within GA4. Within Universe Analytics, we have a lot of default reports, whether or not you use them really. And personally on my end, I believe that Google Analytics has a lot of overhead to it, and that's why if you use Google Analytics, it got slower and slower throughout the years. So one thing they did was remove a lot of these reports. Now that isn't to say that you can't have these reports again, because there is a library function within GA4 that allows you to actually build your own reports. The idea here is that there is a large influx of data that's being recorded by GA4, and via that large influx of data, we want to actually build GA4 around what we want to see rather than what Universe Analytics says that you might want to see, right? So this is a custom thing that we're doing for each website that's out there too. And that actually leads us to the idea of, do we want to actually work within GA4, or do we want to pull that data out into a data visualization software such as Google Looker Studio or Tableau? There's also many other items out there that you can actually go through and build these dashboards. But basically, if we don't want to use GA4 to send out what we usually would send out to other stakeholders, we would want to actually take this data and put it into Looker Studio or Tableau to actually develop a dashboard that we could send out to people rather than have them, dirty their hands within GA4. And then on the exact opposite side of that, if we want to be really nerdy about it, and you are one of those people that are really into numbers in GA4, there are explorations that are included within GA4. And this is different than the actual reports themselves. This basically is the Google Analytics is allowing you to go through, take a look at the information, try to find a pattern, and then once you find that pattern, make that into a report. So before you actually make that into a report, we can actually go through and look at some explorations like freeform, which is basically just linking a lot of data together, trying to figure out any pattern that we're seeing. There's a funnel exploration. This is something similar to the behavior flow, or actually the path exploration would be more of that. But the funnel exploration, path exploration, you've seen before, but now because, like I said before, everything's events, we can actually create more robust versions of those funnel and path explorations because everything is events coming through. Now that we've talked about the major things that are happening within GA4, let's talk about how we're going to transition to GA4 from your current setup of Universal Analytics. The first thing we want to do is create an audit of your current site. Just like anything else, when you start a project, you want to make sure you have everything lined up, and you want to make sure you have all the data that you possibly can have to actually set up this transition. And that is the same thing with the Universal Analytics. We want to take a look at your technical code, data audits, event tracking, e-commerce tracking, and site metrics, right? We want to make sure that all that data is coming in smoothly, and we haven't, maybe someone created a instance of Google Analytics in the past, and they didn't set something up right. This is the time to actually fix those things, and so this is what that audit is going to bring out. And then the account structure, because there's no views in GA4, it means we need to actually rethink how we filter and segment that data. Because we do introduce data streams, which allows you to combine multiple devices coming in. We've eliminated those views, and we will actually want to take a more robust look at that data and how we can actually segment that data out, or what data we need to actually pull in together. That data that we can prevent from coming into GA4 can be done, like I said, within the code on page and or within Google Tag Manager. And then with the introduction of events and parameters GA4, we need to mirror what we currently have within Universal Analytics. And we do this by using something called the solution design document. It could have different names around the internet and or within your organization. Basically, what we're doing is we're creating an Excel document, a Google Sheets document that takes what we currently have coming in terms of events and translates those to what they look like in GA4 with the events and the parameters too. This also allows you to actually go through and bulk up the amount of parameter data that you're sending out to, because before, like I said, you didn't have that option altogether. So this is a good time to actually sit down, take a look at everything holistically, and put together a good plan of what we're going to pull over event-wise and what data is going to come over with it. And then there's going to be technical changes that need to happen within the site too. Like I said before, we had one version of GA and we had one version of Universal Analytics in the past that has one type of code, and that's now changed within GA4. So this is also a time while we're looking at these technical changes to try to figure out if you want to move to a tag management software like Google Tag Manager to actually place code on the actual page itself. So we're going to stop here for 1 second and just backtrack on what Google Tag Manager is. A lot of people have a misunderstanding of it being included within GA or it being the same thing as Google Analytics by itself, and it's actually not. The name itself, Google Tag Manager, explains really what it is, and then it's a manager for all the tags that are on your website. So any third-party tags, Google Tag Manager can actually help you place those on your site, and it actually allows marketers that might not be more front-end savvy or developers to actually place those tags and manage those tags all together. We do suggest doing this only for the sheer fact that it just makes everything a lot easier down the road, especially if you want to go in and make some changes, or even when we're testing or previewing the changes altogether too. And then the last part is, what do we want to actually report on, and what do we want to export, or perhaps do we want to export that data, right? Because we only have a portion of the default reports that UA does, we're going to either make a decision to build those new reports within GA4 or use GA4 as a data repository and then send that data out to different outside data products such as Google Tag Manager. You can send by default, GA4 does actually have a BigQuery export that's free. And so you can actually send that data over to BigQuery if you have enough data to, if it's too bulky to work with, we can do it that way too. But basically, we just want to take this time to say, okay, what do we have before? How do we mimic / clone it? And if we can't, how do we make something better within, let's say, Looker Studio? And then from there, those are your main items that you want to go through when you're transitioning through a site, right? We want to make sure that as we go through, we're making healthy decisions of maybe we didn't need that data previously, so we're going to knock that out. Maybe we actually need more data because, one stakeholder was always looking for data that someone actually had to go through manually, pull, and then send out. We can actually move that over to Looker Studio and or create something with a GA4 that we can send out to those stakeholders too. Basically, just a holistic approach of taking a look at what we did have before, how we're going to mimic, and then how we're going to proceed to send that data out also. Now, this portion is basically how Adage can help you do all those things. So Adage is your GA4 partner. So as we prepare your organization for GA4, Adage is happy to be there to help. And that includes any services that are around that transition that we just talked about. Setting up tagging and goals for seamless data collection. A lot of customers out there don't have the proper staff on hand to manage that information or manage those tags, and we could definitely take care of that for you. I've been using GTM for a while. Most of our sites have it on there. And so we can definitely go in and add those tags for you. Conducting a comprehensive data audit. Once again, this is the top priority of the actual transition process. And so we can actually help you with that comprehensive data audit. We can help you with building your data streams and trying to figure out which way you want to actually pull in that data. And then provide a solutions design document for your event transition. This is a big one only for the sure fact that there's a lot of people that do not use GA4 or are being brought in new at this moment to GA4. And that solution design document really is going to be key to explain and document what you did with your website and how you set everything up for GA4. A new person can come in, take a look at that document. It tells you exactly what you need in terms of what events are coming in, what parameters are there, etc. So it's really a good idea to have that as robust as possible and have that ongoing too. And then installing GTM tags, just like I said before, setting up tagging and goals, we could definitely help with. And then also creating those Looker Studio dashboards, right? These are, like I said, at least in my opinion, are going to be the future of what you want to do within your site when it comes to sending that data off to stakeholders. It is very concise. You can make it exactly what you want, all on one page. And you can actually either send that page out to someone as a static document, or give them a link to a dynamic version of that Looker Studio, which allows them to click on different elements and actually change the anything that you actually put on the page actually. But like one of the things is a date range, right? So you're not actually just saying, okay, just this area, because those stakeholders can go through and take a look at the older data, compare it with the new data, and then make their own decisions too. We do offer training also. So we know that it's a little different, or I should say GA4 is a lot different in terms of the front end and the back end. The way that they actually display that data is totally different, because of those events and everything else that's coming through. And we actually do offer training that takes you through the front end, the back end, best practices with data collection, the explorations, like I mentioned before, and how to use them. The overview of the admin section, basically how to set up everything too, and then exporting data to BigQuery and Looker Studio and much more basically. Anything that you need on the front end or back end, we're well versed on, and we can definitely train on that. And then the last thing we want to mention is that we do actually have a product called Adiron Optimize that is for a lot of clients that do not have someone on staff to help with this. right now there's a lot of clients out there that have someone on staff that knows analytics kind of. I mean, it might be you actually who is watching this right now. But if we do not have that, we can actually be that person for you, right? We can create all the things we mentioned before. The list here is about the same. A basic analytics audit, analytics audits with goal and KPI workshop. But we're going to be here to bring you through the actual transition, to take a look at your actual current goals and KPIs, and then transfer them over. And all these also can be done as just one item by itself too, right? So the Looker Studio dashboard can be by itself also, but together, the Adiron Optimize offering actually puts all of this in one place. So it's a one-stop shop and a one-stop solution for the actual transition, and then actually ongoing and reporting from there on. And then we're going to stop there for a Q&A. Danielle, do you know if there anything came in the back end?
Yes, so thank you so much for going through all of that, Vince. We do have a few questions. So the first one for you is, if someone has Looker Studio reports currently set up, do they need to download those before Google deletes their data? And if so, how long do they have access to those original reports?
So we have two things here, one being the Looker Studio and one being Google Analytics itself, right? So Google Analytics itself, starting July of next year, will stop taking in data, but that data will stay there for at least a year, and that's what Google has said. They haven't gone through and expounded about that, like I said previously, but it's, you know, basically let's just work with the idea that it's a year's worth of data, and we can export that data for that year, right? And that means that we can either go through and export that data on a report by report basis, or we can use something like a third party that allows us to go through and automatically start looking at that data and grabbing it down and putting it into Excel documents, you know, Google Sheets, etc. Google does, because the Google Sheets product is a product of Google, obviously. Because of that, it has a really good integration with exporting data from Google Analytics. So you can export those pretty fast on that end. In terms of Looker Studio, the fact that we actually have everything already pulling in data, that's not going to end in terms of being able to look at that data. Just like GA, it's not going to pull in any data. Looker Studio by itself is literally just pulling in the GA database into its own studio, that with that link that is added in when you create a Looker Studio. So it's just going to stop reporting data beyond that date, but you'll have the date in the past if you have that date within that data within GA, because like I said, it's only pulling in the GA database. So my suggestion would be to segment out or figure out which one of these items that you, or which one of these reports that you want, and start exporting now. The actual fact of the matter is that as we move forward into GA4 by itself, the value of that past data is going to get less and less, right? I don't know a lot of clients that are to go back in 2 years worth of data from Google Studio, or sorry, Google Analytics, or Looker Studio, and try to grab that data. Usually for a lot of our clients, it's not that important because they actually have a truer sense of data in their backend or a CMS, right? So that's where the repository of all that data is. Analytics itself is just there so that we can actually see the visual / patterns within that data. And so basically, as we move forward, that data not going to be as big or as important, but yeah, long story long, we want to go through and we want to export that data now, so we do actually have that in the future.
Okay, great, thanks. And then For next question we have, so we do have someone asking if there is a cost for just the GA4 training. Are you aware of what that looks like yet, Vince, or is that something we should get back to where we can chat with our client consultants?
Yeah, I would go through and I would contact your accountant or the consultant, and then they can actually give you a price on that, because it might actually be a little bit different depending on what you need. If it's just a front end type situation where you just want a refresher or training on how to work with the front end, it's going to be one thing. If you want the whole kit and caboodle, that's going to be something totally different.
And then also the blank template that you had originally shown, which was the map from the old to the new, is that something that is shared, or is that something that is included when we go through like an audit?
That's something that's included with the audit itself, right? When we're doing the audit and we're going through and we're doing the transition, we use that document, and so that document itself will be put together for you, and we'll export that and send that to you, so you actually have that documentation.
And then additionally, right, let's see. We have a few more questions that came in, so quick reading through so I can get them over to you. So going back originally to when you were talking about Looker Studio and events, we do have someone who commented that it sounds like everything will be moving to events, and there will need fewer tags and data variables and can use parameters instead, at least in some cases. Are they understanding this correctly? And will it make it easier for us to customize what we are tracking?
It definitely makes it easier for you to customize what you're tracking, because we're not, with the old version of UA, we only had custom dimensions that we can only use a sole amount of, right? A very small amount of. And parameters wise, there's a lot of parameters we can attach to each one of those events. The one thing I do want to say is that the problem with Google is that their nomenclature and the way they speak of events is different for each one of their products, right? And within Google Tag Manager, there is an event that means that something's being sent to a data layer, and it's something that we can grab onto. Within GA, an event, or I should say a universal, the event that came through was just a user interaction that had a small amount of data attached to it. Within GA4, an event is actually a proper way of sending that data all together, right? We had that difference between a page view and an event before, and now it's not there. Everything is an event, because we can actually use that to our advantage to segment out everything and actually put a lot of metadata into those events, so you can actually describe what's going on too. A good example would be the fact when someone logs into a website before, we use just one event that's sent over that says, hey, someone logged in. But we can actually send a login, and then once that person logs in, we can send an event of login, and then the type of user, and then any other parameters or data that we want to send, so that we can say, okay, well, before we knew that so many people actually logged into the site on a daily basis, but now we know that these people that actually have this clearance and or this amount of, or this type of person are actually logging in on a daily basis, and we know now that it's different from this other person. So we need to engage these other people that are not logging in more than we do with these the ones that are logging in daily.
Okay. And then we do have another question about if we were planning to do more GA4 webinars. I know, Vince, as far as we're concerned, we don't have any scheduled at this moment, but we are in the process of planning our upcoming webinars, so we will keep that in mind. And then we just had another question come in. Are we building GA4 events into the ACE components? Are you aware of anything with that, Vince?
Yes, we are actually in the process of doing so. I created a document already that labels and actually plans out each one of those two. So we are going to be sending out that data. And our goal is to add a lot of parameters to those events. So we're sending in a lot of really good data that we weren't getting previously. But that is, a TBD in terms of when we're going to release that. that's something that I'll have to actually talk to Ace for that.
And then they are curious about what is the timeline for that, if that's
Yeah.
available.
Yeah, we have no timeline for that right this second. I know that we want to get it out sooner or later, and we did go through and take a look at how hard it would be. So the initial event passing is pretty easy. But beyond that, it gets a little bit difficult on the other end of setting parameters and everything else. So we're looking into that and trying to figure out what we can do in a piecemeal fashion, right? Where we're going to send out something that's very beneficial, and then must-haves, and then nice-to-haves too. So sorry, we don't actually have a timeline, but we will talk internally and then get something out when we have something.
And then will we be working with this at all in any capacity with SmartSeat that you were aware of?
Same thing too. Yeah, we went through and we've identified everything. We actually have those events set up too. All that documentation's there also. It's just waiting to be integrated within the actual product too. So that's a TBD also. Once we have that data, we'll release it.
Okay, and those are all the questions we have. I believe, Vince, you have some contact info as well?
Yes. If you need more information, you can contact Adage through the website via analytics and or the contact area too. Also, if you are already a customer and you're speaking to one of our consultants, you can ask them about all the information also, and we'll be happy to get back to you with how we can help.
Yes, and as a reminder, we will be sharing a recording of this webinar sometime in the next week. So you can expect to see that come out. So you are also, and if you have any other questions, feel free, as Vince said, to contact your account rep. And otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're very excited about this transition to GA4, and we hope that we have given you some great information for you to get ready for your transition. Thank you. Bye.